The first time Commander Cale Garner stood on the surface of Tarviss 4, he realized two things. 1. The temperature made Arizona summers feel like a light spring breeze, and 2. His translator implant was going to get a workout. Commander Garner came the gravelly voice of Sub-Officer Vec, a towering six-limbed Frolaxian whose teal skin shimmered slightly under the heat. Your unit is late. Cale adjusted his helmet and bit back the obvious response. We were busy not dying in orbit. Turns out your moon has a magnetic field that plays tag with our NAV systems. Vec blinked probably. Frolaxians didn't really have eyelids. Excuses do not delay the enemy. We're here now. Cale gestured behind him at his four-person team, all panting under the weight of heat and gear. Show us where you need us. The war on Tarviss 4 wasn't Cale's war. It wasn't even Earth's war. It was a diplomatic favor. The Intergalactic Council had called on humans to assist with a regional conflict after the Council's peacekeepers were ambushed during a failed negotiation. The Frolaxians needed boots, Earth sent theirs. Cale had been one of the first volunteers, more out of curiosity than patriotism. The Frolaxians, however, weren't thrilled with their human reinforcements. As they moved through the hostile terrain, Vec kept glancing over his shoulder like he expected Cale to melt from the heat. The terrain was brutal, jagged volcanic ridges and sinkholes that hissed steam every few minutes. Cale's suit regulated temperature, but only to a point. He could feel the sweat pooling in places he didn't want to think about. We lost patrols here, Vec said, pointing at a dry ravine. Enemy strikes from above. We suspect burrowers. Cale crouched, scanning the ridge. No fresh tracks. If they're here, they're sleeping or dead. Or waiting, Vec said. Cale motioned to his team. Fan out. Watch the peaks. The ambush came 6 minutes later. A shriek split the air, followed by a volley of plasma bolts. One of the humans, Bryce, went down screaming. Cale dove sideways, rolled behind a rock, and fired upward. The enemy short, broad-bodied reptilians called the Varnock had been using camo cloaks. They shimmered as they moved, blending into the landscape like ghosts. Bryce is hit, shouted Mira, the team's medic. Cover him. Cale bellowed. He sprinted forward, using the uneven landscape to his advantage. A plasma bolt scorched past his arm, searing the edge of his armor. He didn't slow. He reached Bryce, grabbed the man under one arm, and dragged him toward cover. Varnock fire intensified. Then something slammed into Cale's side. He heard the crunch before he felt the pain. He collapsed behind a boulder, gasping. His side howled with agony. Mira scrambled over, eyes wide. Commander, you damn it, you're hit bad. Where's Bryce? Unconscious. He's stable, but you're not. You've got a gash running half your ribs. There's bone showing. Cale's breath came in sharp, shallow bursts. Is it bleeding out? Not yet, but then I'm still good to fight. Mira stared at him like he'd sprouted a second head. No, you're not. You can't even sit up straight. I've still got my trigger finger. He hauled his rifle to his lap and peered over the rock. Keep Bryce alive. I'll keep them back. Before she could argue, he fired. The recoil jarred his ribs, and his vision dimmed for a second. He blinked through it. He wasn't dead. That was enough. Vec appeared seconds later, flanked by 2 Frolaxian soldiers. One of them scanned Cale with a handheld device. Wound is mortal, the alien said flatly. Cale grinned. I'm still good to fight. Vec looked down at him, a slow tilt of the head betraying confusion. You jest. No, blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. I fight. Then I pass out. Vec said nothing. Instead, he turned and barked an order. Plasma fire roared overhead. Vec's squad surged forward, using the humans' cover fire to push the Varnock back. Cale kept firing until his magazine was dry. Then he passed out. He woke up in a field med unit, the white synthetic walls humming softly with life support systems. His side felt like someone had buried a hot crowbar in it. Mira sat nearby, arms crossed. You're lucky you didn't die, she said without looking at him. Did I at least look cool? You looked like a sweaty idiot bleeding on alien rocks. Cale laughed. It hurt. He stopped laughing. A Frolaxian officer entered the tent, this one smaller and lighter skinned than Vec. She carried a datapad and stopped at Cale's cot. You are the human who said I'm still good to fight after suffering a critical thoracic wound? Cale blinked. Yeah, that was me. We have reviewed the footage. Your actions were reckless. That's war. Also effective. The enemy was routed. Your defense allowed the second squad to flank. Cale adjusted his position slightly. Pain spiked through his ribs. Glad it worked. You have been labeled as a high-risk asset. A liability. Cale frowned. That's supposed to be a compliment? The alien tilted her head. It is not meant as one. Still, we request your presence at tomorrow's strategy session. Vec wishes to consult you on urban tactics. I can't even sit up. You have 12 hours. The officer left. Mira looked at him. You're not seriously thinking of going. Oh, I'm going. Cale, you've got broken ribs and a puncture wound. You're not even out of danger yet. If I don't go, they'll assume I'm unreliable. I'm trying to build trust here. You think they're gonna listen to anything we say if I skip the first real meeting? She muttered something under her breath, then stood. I'll bring your boots. 12 hours later, Cale limped into the strategy tent, his side heavily bandaged and his breath short. Vec stood at the central table surrounded by holographic maps. He looked up as Cale entered. You were late. I'm alive. That's early in my book. Vec gestured at the map. We plan to retake the city of Kalthos. You have urban combat experience? Yeah. Fallujah. Twice. I do not know this Fallujah. Be glad. The meeting lasted an hour. Cale gave suggestions on choke points, sniper positions, and flanking routes. Vec listened, occasionally grunting. By the end, the plan had shifted significantly. Outside the tent, Mira was waiting. You're pale. I'm always pale. Paler than usual. I'll live. That's not the same as being fine. No, Cale said. It's not. That night, he lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling. Every movement sent pain lancing through his side. The med scans confirmed 2 fractured ribs and a deep muscle laceration. No lung damage, thankfully, but the recovery would take weeks. He had no intention of waiting that long. The next morning, he dragged himself out of bed, suited up, and reported for duty. Your injury is not healed, Vec said. Cale nodded. I know. You insist on participating? I'm still good to fight. The phrase had already spread across the base. Vec studied him. If you fall, you will not rise. Then I'll make sure I don't fall. Vec said nothing more. The assault on Kalthos began at dawn. The humans were assigned to a rear position support only. Cale argued his way into the front unit. The city was a mess of collapsed buildings and narrow alleys. The Varnock had entrenched themselves in the upper levels, firing down on any approach. Cale's team advanced under the cover of drones. He moved slower than usual, each step jarring his ribs, but his aim held steady. They reached a central plaza and took cover near a shattered fountain. Plasma bolts rained from above. Cale spotted a sniper nest and signaled to Mira. I'll distract. You flank. You can't even run. I don't need to run. Just move. He broke from cover, drawing fire. Mira and the others slipped into position and took the nest. The sniper fell. The plaza fell quiet. Cale slumped against a wall, gasping. You're bleeding again, Mira said. I know. You need evac. I need one more push. She didn't argue. The final push came at dusk. The Varnock were retreating. Cale's team led the charge into the last building. He kicked open a door, fired 3 times, and cleared the room. Then he collapsed. When he woke, he was in the med unit again. This time he stayed for a week. Vec visited once. You endangered yourself. I know. You also saved 20 of my soldiers. I know that too. Vec paused. Your resilience is unexpected. Cale didn't respond. You are still not healed. Yet I suspect you will insist on returning. I'm still good to fight, Cale said. Vec nodded once. Then rest. You will fight again soon. And this time Cale rested, because he knew the fight wasn't over. But he also knew that when it came, he'd be ready. For days after the assault on Kalthos, Cale was leaning against a rust-stained railing on the outer perimeter of the Frolaxian forward base, one arm still strapped in a sling, ribs wrapped tight beneath his uniform. His breath came easier now, though each cough still felt like someone was pinching the inside of his chest with tongs. Below him, the ruins of the city sprawled like a broken circuit board, the last of the smoke columns finally dwindling into the dry sky. "You're going to tear something again if you keep standing like that," said Mira as she stepped up beside him, her boots crunching over the gravel path that ringed the command post. "I've been sitting for 81 hours, he said. "I counted. My back's staging a mutiny. You could ask for muscle relaxants." "I did. They said I'd use them to sneak out again." Mira made a face somewhere between disbelief and reluctant agreement. "That's probably fair." A few meters behind them, a cluster of Frolaxian engineers were assembling something that looked like a satellite dish strapped to a beetle's back. One of them, a short, translucent skin technician named Droth, glanced over at Cale every few minutes with the same expression someone might give a rabid animal that had just learned to open doors. "They think I'm some kind of cursed icon," Cale muttered. "They think you're unpredictable," Mira said. "Which, to be fair, you are. I didn't plan to get gutted in the ribs, Mira. You planned to keep fighting after you were. That's the part that stuck." Before he could reply, a low chime rang out across the base. It wasn't an alarm, but it wasn't casual either. Mira turned toward the central tower. "That's a briefing tone." Cale pushed himself off the railing, wincing. "Guess I'm about to be told to sit this one out." Inside, the command chamber was dimly lit, not out of necessity but preference. Frolaxians disliked harsh overheads, and the humans had adjusted accordingly. Vex stood at the center again, his posture more rigid than usual. A rotating projection hovered above the table, showing a topographical image of a mountainous ridge system 20 kilometers southeast. Cale stepped in and remained at the edge. Vec looked up but didn't say anything, which was either a quiet permission or a silent dare. "The Varnok have retreated to the Grell Spires," Vex said without preamble. "We estimate 2,000 infantry supported by orbital spotting drones and ground-based artillery. They are digging in. Same pattern as the Sarn Divide," muttered one of the Frolaxian tacticians. "No," said Vec. "They are not preparing for defense. They are preparing for collapse." Cale frowned. "They're trying to bring the ridge down?" "Correct. They intend to bury the pass entirely. Deny access to our convoys, force us into the dead zone." Mira leaned close to Cale. "Dead zone? Volcanic flatland. No cover, no water. It makes Nevada look like a water park." Vec gestured at the projection again. "We must stop the detonation. Their charges are buried within the ridge face. We cannot strike from orbit, the instability is too great. A ground team must infiltrate." The room fell quiet. "How many are we sending?" asked one of the younger lieutenants. 5. Cale coughed, then regretted it immediately. "You'll need someone who's crawled through unstable ground before. You are not yet combat fit." "I'm not asking to fire a rifle. I'm asking to crawl up a slope and disarm explosives." "That's different. You were injured. I'm also the only person on this base who spent 2 years working demolition disposal in collapsed urban zones." Vec's secondary eyes blinked out of sync. "You did not disclose that. You never asked." Vec stared at him for a long time. Finally, he tilted his head toward a nearby medic. "Evaluate him. If he can manage load-bearing movement and sustained oxygenation past 900 meters, he may go." "I can do that," Cale said. "You will prove it." 2 hours later, Cale was strapped into a repurposed training rig in the Med Dome, crawling up a synthetic incline designed to simulate the crumbling shale of the Grell Spires. His side burned, and his arm screamed with each push, but he kept going. The medic, a violet-toned Frolaxian with a single vertical crest, watched silently, recording vitals. At the 900-meter mark, Cale collapsed, gasping. "Still breathing." "Barely," muttered Mira from the corner. The medic tapped a final code into his tablet. He qualifies. Technically. By the time they reached the drop point at dusk, Cale was suited in a reinforced harness with a stabilizing brace along his torso and a lightweight drone pack on his back. The Frolaxian unit assigned to the strike team was led by a female named Cha, whose voice carried a constant undertone of dry skepticism. You are the human who insisted on returning despite suboptimal condition. Yeah. Hi. I'm Cale. You will slow us down. Possibly. But I'll keep you alive. Cha didn't reply. Instead, she clicked her mandibles once and turned to check her gear. They moved at nightfall. The ridge was as unstable as predicted, with loose stone giving way under every second step. Cale kept low, his breathing measured, counting each foothold. He let the Frolaxians lead where the path narrowed, using his drone to map out the sublayers of rock as they advanced. Halfway up, a tremor shook the slope. Dust poured from above, and a boulder the size of a small car tumbled past them, missing Cha by less than a meter. Is this normal? She asked. Geologically, yes. Comfortably, no. They reached the first of the charges just past midnight. It was buried under a thin layer of false shale, disguised by electromagnetic dampeners. Cale lay flat, peeled back the cover, and stared at the rig. This isn't Varnock design. This is old council ordnance. Modified. Can you disarm it? Yeah, but it's got a snap trigger. We'll need to isolate the power conduit without vibrating the casing. Cha crouched beside him. What happens if it vibrates? We become part of the slope. He worked by touch, fingers moving slowly around the internal cavity. Sweat stung his eyes. He could feel his side tightening again, muscles pulling against the brace. He ignored it. One wrong connector and they'd be vapor. After 27 minutes, the charge went dark. One down, he said. 3 more. The second was easier, buried in a notch between 2 slabs of fused basalt. The third, however, was already armed. We've got less than 10 minutes, he said, checking the timer. And this one's linked to the third and fourth. We mess this up, they all go. Cha looked at him. You require assistance? No. I require silence. This one wasn't just a snap trigger. It had a cellular resonance filter designed to detect intrusion patterns. He had to mimic the last access code or bypass the sensor entirely. He chose the second. He used a microfilament from his pack, working it under the casing and tapping into the signal node. His hands were shaking now. He bit his lip until he tasted blood, forcing them still. 6 minutes passed. Then 7. Finally, the timer stopped blinking. He exhaled. That's all of them. They started back down, moving faster now. The ridge trembled once as they descended, but nothing collapsed. At the bottom, Cha turned to him. You were reckless. Probably. But effective. I get that a lot. She nodded once. We will report success. You should report to medical. He nodded, suddenly too tired to respond. By sunrise, he was back in the med dome, hooked 2 and 4 and covered in dust. Mira looked down at him, one eyebrow raised. You're bleeding internally. I noticed. Was it worth it? We stopped a mountain from falling on a supply route. She sighed and handed him a protein bar. Eat. Sleep. Try not to die before breakfast. As he drifted off, he could still feel the slope beneath him, and the weight of the ridge held back by hands that shouldn't have been there. But he'd been good to fight, and for now that was enough. 3 days after the Grellspire's op, Cale was hauled out of the med dome at dawn by a Frolaxian logistics officer who looked like she'd rather be scrubbing hull rot than talking to a human. She carried a data tablet and didn't bother with introductions. You are to report to the transit yard. Immediately. I'm supposed to be horizontal for another 36 hours. You are conscious. That is sufficient. Cale sat up slowly, ribs tugging under the compression wrap. If this is about the unauthorized fusion of a trauma brace to a drone harness, that was a design improvement, not sabotage. The officer didn't blink. You are being sent to Dervik Station. He blinked instead. That's 300 kilometers north. There's nothing there but sand, rail lines, and a fuel depot. There is also a delegation. He rubbed his temple. Why am I being sent to talk to a delegation? My diplomacy rating is so low I once accidentally convinced an envoy to declare independence from his own planetary council. We are aware. Cale didn't get a transport. He got strapped into the rear of a multi-legged crawler with peeling paint and a cargo hold that reeked of ozone and dried coolant. The driver, a Frolaxian civilian contractor with a fondness for static-filled music, hummed off-key for 6 straight hours as they rumbled across the cracked terrain. By the time they reached Dervik, the sun was low and angry in the sky. The station itself was a squat cluster of reinforced domes surrounded by motion sensors and automated guns. No flags, no insignias. Just the hiss of airlocks and the low whine of turbines. A tall figure in dull green armor met him at the gate. Not Frolaxian. Taller, leaner, with folding joints and a face like polished coral. "Commander Garner," it said, voice flat as gravel. "You will follow." Cale followed. The interior was cooler, but not by much. The walls were lined with sealed crates and segmented conduits that pulsed with soft blue light. They passed 3 different species in the corridor, none of whom acknowledged him. That wasn't unusual. Humans had a reputation, and it wasn't one that made people wave. The room they led him to was circular, with a shallow pit in the center and tiered seating around it. 4 delegates sat spaced around the ring. A Frolaxian logistics chief, a Marnati trade ambassador with bioluminescent skin, a Hekari archivist who clicked softly to itself, and a Glav strategist whose limbs coiled around the seat like vines. The coral-faced usher gestured. "Stand in the center." Cale stepped forward, eyebrows raised. "Is this a tribunal, a talent show, or something in between?" The Frolaxian spoke first. "We have reviewed your field data, Commander. Your decisions in Kalthos and the Grell Spires were effective, but unconventional." "I've heard that before." The Marnati's skin flickered in a spiral pattern. "You ignored medical recommendations and altered mission parameters without clearance." "Correct." "You endangered yourself and others." "Also correct." The Glav strategist leaned forward slightly. "And yet, your absence from either operation would have resulted in higher casualties." "Probably." The Hekari clicked. Its interpreter unit translated. "Explain." "Explain which part?" The Frolaxian narrowed its eyes. "Why you persisted beyond operational thresholds. Why you risked re-injury. Why you refused reassignment." Cale crossed his arms, then winced and uncrossed them. "Because that's what we do. Where I come from, if you can move and breathe and think, you keep going. Doesn't mean you don't hurt. It means the job gets done anyway." The Marnati's glow changed tone. "That logic is unsustainable. Only if you're trying to sustain comfort." The Glav tilted its head. "You prioritize mission completion over personal survival?" "Not always. But if I'm the difference between a win and a graveyard, then yeah, I'll take the hit." The room was quiet for a moment. Then the Frolaxian gestured. "You will be assigned to oversight duty." Cale blinked. "That's punishment." "It is observation. I'm not a lab rat. You are an anomaly." "We must understand your operational logic." "I already told you the logic. We will confirm it through repetition." Cale sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Fine. Where am I being sent?" "A training simulation in Sector 8. You will supervise a mixed-species unit through a controlled engagement scenario. Combat is non-lethal. The purpose is evaluation. No live weapons? Stun rounds and adhesive bursts only. And I just watch? You intervene only if protocol is breached." He narrowed his eyes. "This is either going to be very boring or very educational." They gave him a ride this time. A sleek personnel skimmer with a sealed cabin and a polite onboard system that offered hydration every 20 minutes. 24 hours later, he was standing on the edge of a simulated canyon, watching 6 soldiers in mismatched armor try to coordinate a flanking maneuver on a mock enemy bunker. It was going terribly. The Varnock recruit kept charging ahead without cover. The Cerny twins, who communicated almost entirely via scent, kept misinterpreting the Frolaxian's position signals. The lone human, a private named Trish Devane, had taken cover behind a rock and hadn't moved in 6 minutes. Cale tapped his earpiece. "Trish, you planning to redecorate that boulder or join the push?" "Waiting for the twins to stop fogging up my HUD. Then move left. Fresh air's over the ridge." She moved. The bunker's defense system tracked her and fired a burst of paint rounds. She ducked, rolled, and got to the wall. "Nice." The Varnock charged again and got stuck in an adhesive trap. Cale groaned. "Freeze the sim." The canyon flickered. The enemies vanished. The recruits looked around, confused. He walked down into the simulation field, hands on his hips. "All right, gather up." They did slowly. The Varnock still had adhesive on his legs. Cale pointed at it. "What's the first rule of unknown terrain?" "Visual sweep before movement," the Varnock muttered. "Good. And what's the second rule?" "Don't sprint into glowing circles." Cale nodded. "Progress." He turned to the twins. "You two need to figure out how to communicate without giving each other motion sickness." One of the twins exhaled a puff of green mist. "Wrong color," Cale said. "That means retreat in Cerny tactical code." No wonder Trish almost bailed. The other twin groaned audibly. Cale turned to Trish. "You've got instincts, but don't play statue. Mobility is survival." She nodded, brushing paint off her shoulder. They ran the sim again. And again. And again. By dusk, they were functioning like a unit. Not perfect, but no one got stuck, no one misread signals, and Trish cleared the bunker solo on the final run. Back at the tent, Cale sat on a crate and sipped something vaguely citrus from a thermal flask. The coral-faced usher from Dervik approached, this time without ceremony. "You deviated from the observer role." "Briefly." "You offered tactical correction." "Repeatedly." "Yet the unit improved." "Eventually." The usher studied him. "You do not operate within our projections. That's why you dragged me into a canyon with paint guns." The usher tilted its head. "You are being reassigned." Cale raised an eyebrow. "To where?" "Nowhere. You are being retained." "As what?" "A resilience consultant." Cale barked a laugh. "Is that a real position or something you just invented?" "Both." He stood and cracked his back. "Fine. But I'm doing it my way. That is expected." Cale looked up at the sky. 2 moons were rising, casting long shadows across the training ground. The wind was cooler now, whistling through the canyons like a sigh. He tossed the empty flask into a bin and stretched carefully. "Still good to work." The usher watched him for a beat. "We believe you." And for the first time since he landed on Tarviss, nobody argued.